Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, we're going to be looking at a brand new supporter card, which is going to be coming out in those family decks over in Japan. So, the other day I showed you all of those new GXs. We saw stuff like Wigglytuff and Pinsir GX. Those were the Pokemon that got their debut GXs. I'll pop a link to that video in the description. Suffice to say, they're not particularly good. The thing is, we're getting Bugcatcher in it. And Bugcatcher is a supporter card that we've not seen before. It is a new supporter card. Now, tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, if you can flip heads, this is pretty gosh darn good. So I guess the question is, do you feel lucky, punk? Well, do ya? What it does is it lets you draw 2 cards, and then you flip a coin, and if heads, you draw 2 more cards. Simple as that. And it goes back to one of the limits of the Pokemon TCG, and one of the limits of the Pokemon TCG, you can draw 3 cards using a supporter. You cannot draw 4. Not without some kind of effort. So what we have is How. How is a very simple, ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill supporter. Lets you draw 3 cards. It's alright. It sees play. It's not too bad. You see, all the ones that allow you to draw 4 are not quite as good. So we have Ash's Friendship. Ash's Friendship is lovely. It lets you draw 2 cards. But if you've got Ash's Pikachu GX on the field, then you get to draw 4 cards instead. Those 2 cards, the Ash's Friendship and Ash's Pikachu GX, never actually made it out over here, but that's not the point. We've seen one of the Battle Shatter Lane ladies does allow you to draw 4 cards, but only if you've actually got a stage 1 in the active opposite you. Sure, you can draw 4 cards, but if your opponent has a basic or a stage 2, then no, you don't actually get to draw 4 cards. So that's a little bit of a pain. Evelyn remains a staunchly situational card. If you're absolutely sure you're going to be playing against stage 1s, fine, but you can't really be sure about that. Incidentally, if you're playing Morgan needs you to discard the other 3 Battle Shatter Lane ladies from your hand in order to play it, in which case Evelyn becomes a viable, useful card. It's just not something on which you can particularly rely on a regular basis. It's a little bit of a pain. Probably the most regularly played one of these is Sophocles, that lets you draw 4 cards, just so long as you discard 2 cards from your hand first. So you see where I'm going with this? Drawing 4 cards is absolutely great. The problem is, you're actually drawing 4 cards on a coin flip, 2 without. It's either better than How or it's worse. I suppose fairly obviously. The one that really springs to mind here is Professor Birch. So Professor Birch, you've shuffled your hand into your deck and then you flipped a coin. If heads, you drew yourself a new hand of 7 cards. Wonderful. If tails, you drew yourself a new hand of 4 cards. That's actually not particularly good at all, because that's basically the equivalent of being judged or having a Marshadow dropped on you. And nowadays we use that as a bad thing. Red card. These are not things you want to have happen to you. And the problem is they kind of will happen to you if you flip tails on Birch. So, okay, it might let you draw 4 cards, but it's flippy. And we've looked at the best equivalents here. The real question is, are there any decks that are going to particularly want to play this? And the answer is yes. Yes, there absolutely are. If you're playing a deck that wants to draw cards and does not want shuffle draw like Cynthia, because when you shuffle draw, you put the cards back into your deck and that's no good, and wants to have a large hand, so something like Lily will never be any good, because with Lily you draw until you've got 6 or 8 cards in hand, depending on whether it's your first turn or not. So you can't really do that if you've got a handful of cards. Then this becomes potentially quite nice. And there are 2 decks in particular that I'm thinking of when I think about this. First of all, we've got Unknown Hand. Unknown Hand lets you win the game, and all you've got to do is have 36 cards in hand. Okay. It's not Not the easiest, if I'm honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. Not the easiest thing to pull off. But if you can pull it off, you literally win the game. So shuffle draw's no good here with Cynthia. And as soon as you get anywhere close to winning the game, then you're not actually going to be able to use Lily. I think I said 36. It is, of course, 35. So unknown hand wants to just pure draw. This is pure draw. The other one that springs to mind is one I looked at a little while ago, which is Miltank. Because Miltank does 60 damage for each Moo Moo Milk that you've got in your hand. So ideally here, you get 4 Moo Moo Milk in your hand, and then you roll. And you would use Alolan Ninetales to search them out, or when it comes out, Green Search. Now that card can only be played if you have 0 Pokemon in play with abilities, but it does let you search your deck for any 2 trainer cards and put them into your hand. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's awkward, but we forgive it because it's actually awesome. And I did show you a video about Miltank recently, I'll pop a link in the description, that has actually won tournaments over in Japan. There is a deck list video, which will be coming when all these new card reveals slow down for a moment. So if we look at decks like that, now we could be rolling. Because in those decks, you've got to draw. Cynthia off the table, Lily off the table. And when we look at pure draw, we don't really have very many good options at the moment. We've got the aforementioned How, which lets you draw 3, which is fine, incidentally. In a deck where you just want to pure draw, it's okay. It's not particularly amazing, but it's all right. And then you got Whitney. Draw a card, then draw 2 cards for each other Whitney in your discard pile. So clearly, and this might seem fairly obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway, the more Whitneys you play, the better Whitney gets. First Whitney draws you a card, that's garbage. Second Whitney draws you 3 cards, that's How. Third Whitney draws you 5 cards, that's really good. And the fourth Whitney draws you 7 cards, and a flat draw of 7 is phenomenal. That's Professor Sycamore without having to do the discard beforehand. So make no mistake about it. Whitney's fine and Whitney's good, but Whitney takes some time in the late game. It takes some time to get rolling. You're not going to be dropping a turn 1 Whitney very easily. Now don't get me wrong, maybe you play something like an Ultra Ball and you discard 2 Whitney so that you then immediately play the third and draw 5. That can happen. And then, of course, once you've played a couple Whitney, you can use stuff like Pal Pad or Lusamine to get 1 or 2 of them back. And then Lusamine is a draw 5 or a draw 7. And at that point, it does become a really, really nice card. But it takes a lot to get to that stage. So then we circle back round to Bugcatcher. If we're playing these pure draw decks, and we're basically relying on How and Whitney, which really are the only 2 good options at the moment for pure draw, would we want to substitute Bugcatcher in instead? And the answer is maybe. Because make no mistake about it, if you can hit a head, it is significantly better than How. There is a big difference between getting 1 extra card. There's a very good reason why Tate and Liza sees very little play and Cynthia is a staple in almost every deck, because Cynthia gets you an extra card. Getting 4 rather than 3 is phenomenal, getting 2 rather than 3 is devastating. So we go back to what I said right at the beginning of the video, and my conclusion is essentially the same as my introduction here. Are you feeling lucky? Because if yes, then Bugcatcher's amazing. The other thing to consider here is it worth taking a couple of turns? Because on average, you'll hit 2 twice and 4 twice. So on average, it is as good as How. On average, if you play 4 of these, you should draw 12 cards. So maybe it's worth it just for those games where it's going to be a little bit better and give you a bit of an edge. Because on average, it's just How. But it has the chance to be better. So let's give it 3 Wassies. I don't think it's a bad card, but I do think we've got options at the moment, which means we're not tied into playing this. But I don't think it's a garbage, never going to see play card. But I would very much like to know what you think about this, ladies and gentlemen. So please do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv patreon.com/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where we talk about games that don't have Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.